itself and how significant it is and where we're at today. But notice what it says here. It says, righteousness exalteth a nation. So we're a nation, so naturally we think about America. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. As often as it is, Proverbs usually gives one statement and it'll give the opposite. Often you'll see that. And here's what we have. We have one range on one side, the exalting of a nation, and on the other side we have the reproach that would happen to a nation. So we're going to talk this morning about let's exalt our nation. So Lord, as we pray, thank you for your word. Thank you, Lord, before America was ever founded, perhaps even thought of except in your own mind, then, Lord, this truth applied to any nation that's ever been. Certainly, as it was written from a Jewish standpoint, in which we believe King Solomon, being the author of this, lived during a time when his nation, during his lifetime, was at its peak. I guess if there was ever a nation that was exalted in the sense of the spiritual and the economic and all of that, then King Solomon lived in that time. And I think he understood what made the nation what it was. So, Lord, as that has passed, and here we are today in America, help us, Lord, to take this truth today and let it be something that we as an individual Christian and citizen will just take to ourselves and say, I'm going to do my part to exalt my nation. So bless us today as we listen to this truth from your word. For Christ's sake, amen. The word exalt, of course, very simple. You don't really need a definition. I think you understand from the context what's being said here. It means, from the Hebrew sense, it means to be high, to rise, or to raise. Other words that were translated from this same Hebrew word. So when a Hebrew word was given, other words could be translated. Other words from the same word in which we get the word exalteth was to lift, to hold up, or promote. I think as Americans, we ought to promote America just because it's our nation, just to start with. I mean, if our nation has problems, and it does, there's always been something because it's made up of people. You understand that. We could also say, though, there's never been a nation like America. We're a very young nation. From the birthday standpoint from which we take the date, July 4th, 1776, some penners sat down and Thomas Jefferson wrote the document, probably with a little bit of help, but for the most part, he's the author of that document. And men signed that document so that it could be delivered to the then reigning power over the colonies, and that, of course, was King George over in England. And I won't get into all the reasons why they did what they did, but the point is they were declaring their independence. Now, here's the thing about that date. Unless you know history, here's what people automatically think, especially when we use the term, it's the birthday of our country. July 4, 1776 was not the date that we were made free. July 4, 1776 is not the date where the war ended, and all of a sudden at that point we said, now we can officially say we're the beginning of a country. Realize in July 4, 1776, when they made that declaration, we're declaring ourselves independent, you've got to realize after that the amount of people that died and fought to give us that freedom. That's not the date in which someone says when all the smoke cleared and everybody says, wow, and everything's great. Now we can officially say we're a nation because we have basically won the battle, or at least the British have surrendered, as Lord Cornwallis did in Yorktown, and they kind of said we're laying it down our arms. And then certainly even after that, the War of 1812, I mean, we were not finished as a nation on July 4, 1776, where we said, you know what, everything's great and we'll have no more problems, we're free, and everybody's going to recognize that, and everything's great. July 4, 1776 was the date in which they says, we're declaring ourselves free from evil, we're declaring ourselves free, we're making ourselves independent, and then there was a lot of bloodshed and a lot of hardship that followed that. And the same thing has been happening ever since that day until this day. We are in a battle for the freedom of this nation. And the truth is, if you've ever raised your hand, like some of you in the military, one year I helped with the census when I lived up in the UP in Michigan. And they said, all right, everybody stand up. You've got to, as a census worker, you're working for the United States government, at least temporarily, and you've got to swear an oath that you're going to uphold the Constitution of the United States. One of the things that, as service members, and I think even as law personnel at least, that you're to defend this nation against foreign foes and domestic foes. Now, we've got foes in this nation that's trying to bring down America because they don't believe in the things that we believe in. At the end of the day, it really boils down to righteousness versus sin. There are some people that don't mind sin running rampant like a river, and that's why we scratch our heads and go, why in the world would anybody think that this and this and this is right when it's absolutely wrong? I'll tell you why, because they don't believe the Bible. They don't believe really life has an absolute. They believe by circumstantial evidence, which means if I think it's right, then it's right. If it feels good to me, then it must be right. You've heard the songs, and I joke about them sometimes, but people say, well, if it feels good, then it's got to be right. Well, that's absolutely not a truth, folks, because sin, when it's finished, it bringeth forth death. There's pleasure in sin for a season. Moses himself enjoyed being kind of coddled by Pharaoh and his daughter, and that was, quote, his kind of mother because he was brought out of the river. But he realized as he got older, he says, look, all this is not for me. I've got a people here, and these people are not just, look, he could have looked at them and said, look, these are slaves, and I'm getting anything I want. Literally, Moses got anything he wanted, and he says, you know what, though? I'd rather align myself with God's people, and whatever the suffering comes from that, I'd rather stick with these people than to quote, live in the world and have all I could have and even possibly one day sit on the throne in Egypt. He said, I'm not going to do that. So I'm here to tell you, righteousness exalteth a nation. Now, here's one of the things I thought about every time I see that verse. Many of you, if you've got any age on, are familiar with these little Gideons New Testaments. The red ones, by design, were to be given out in 5th grade in public schools across America, maybe even the world. I can remember when my brother got his, he's 3 years older than I am, and I remember when he got his, I thought, man, I can't wait till I get to 5th grade just so I can get one of these. That's what I thought. I remember opening up the cover, and I looked in there, and it had his name, and I think it had the date. I don't remember the date, but when I was in 5th grade, that had been the year 1976. And one of the reasons why I think I'm so patriotic is not just because I believe that's something that if you love the Lord, it's a part of that, but it just so happened when I started really realizing anything about history and our country was celebrating 200 years of the bicentennial. Now, everybody made a big deal about that in 1976 because it was exactly 200 years from, obviously, 1776. I was in 5th grade, and our 5th grade class went crazy doing patriotic stuff. I told you this, I was in a play, or a little play, I guess. They had a play in the library, and they asked me to be George Washington, okay, because I was tall, and anyway, so I did everything I could to find stuff at home. They didn't really put you in an outfit. They said, can you find things that might look like George Washington? I think they may have made a little powdered wig for me or whatever. I think they took maybe some cotton balls, threw some baby powder on it, stuck it on my head, and you know how great that probably was. But I remember one of the things I did do to make me look like that era is in those days, all boys wore these white tube socks, and they always had a color band at the top, up around the calf part, and they'd be like blue and red or green. I remember the green and yellow, the blue and red. And I remember I took my pants and I stuffed them down into my socks, so my pants was about just below my knee, and I had those tube socks on, and I had some church shoes on. They had them buckles, so I already looked like I was from 1776 because the clothes I wore even then. But anyway, and I stood there, and they put something, maybe a suit coat like this on me, and they tried to do something, make me look like George Washington, and there we were. All that to say, but the things I was learning, the history and all of that, it was kind of soaking in a little bit. Well, in 5th grade, Gideons came and did their little presentation. We're giving everybody a little Gideons Bible. Nobody said, well, you can't do that, or I'm not interested, or that offends me. Nobody even thought that, I don't guess. Maybe I'm naive. But I remember as I got that little New Testament, and it's red, which designates, here's a brown one, which was for another group of people. I think there were orange ones or green ones given out at college. When I went to one of the community colleges, that the Gideons was allowed then to give college students a Gideons New Testament. And you're thinking, man, what a unique thing. All the public schools at some point in their time, they would give out a New Testament, how significant that is. I think it's significant to America that somebody thought it's important that every young person in school, I'm talking about all across America, was given an opportunity at least to take it. Now, if some took it and threw it in the garbage, or if some took it and took it home and says, I don't know what this is, but we were already church-going people. I just loved it because I was given one, and as I would open up this little thing, you've got a little place to put your name. This one here was given to somebody. I picked this up, I think, at a thrift store. If you go to some thrift stores, they'll give you a free Bible. Well, I always pick them up to give them out to people. This one says, High Point, North Carolina, October 30, 1979. So this is 3 years after I got mine, but someone got theirs on that date. And then when you turn the page, and always when I saw that, something almost gave me chill bumps even then. It has an American flag. And you know what the verse is? The one we just read. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. This is the 1977 edition, it says right here. Now, I'm telling you that because somebody thought it was important, even in our school system hierarchy, said, you know what, when kids get to be about the age of 12, let's give them a Bible. Let's give them a little Bible. At least they'll have a Bible that, if they don't have a Bible, they'll have one, at least a little New Testament. Even includes the Psalms and Proverbs on it. And I respect the Gideons that made these available. I'm sure there were probably businessmen who donated monies and other people to help make this to be printed and all of that. But the point is to put that verse so that some young person would open that up like myself and look at it and go, righteousness exalteth the nation. Now here's the way a lot of people think. Well, there's no way a fifth grader could understand what that means. I understood what it meant. I didn't understand all of it. But when I read that, I understood that if I did right, if I lived right, as a fifth grader, a 12-year-old, you know, 12-year-olds can get in trouble for this, that, and the other. You know, you understand that. We're not talking about probably crime, but I remember when I went to school, man, show you how things have changed. You know, going to school, the worst thing you could do, besides getting in a fight with somebody, was chewing gum. I'm thinking, wow, I mean, of all the things, that's not even in the Bible. Thou shalt not chew. I mean, I thought, what's the big deal about? I really didn't understand really what the big deal about that was, except I guess I thought a lot of kids are going to take that chewing gum, they're going to stick it under a chair, or they're going to stick it on themselves, they're going to stick it in some girl's hair. I guess it was a major problem because despite the rule, if you used to go inside any classroom and look underneath the chairs, guess what you're going to find? A lot of chewing gum. I'll guarantee you in this church right here, underneath these pews somewhere, maybe not in a big-time way, I'll guarantee it because it's been done, because I used to clean the church, and sometimes you start running, your hand grabs something, you go, what in the world is that? And you look underneath there, and I'm talking about adults would chew chewing gum, and they didn't know what to do with it, and they just stuck it under the church pew, and there it is. Now, maybe it held it together better, I don't know. But I'm saying, oh, brother, chewing gum, really, how bad could that be? I know, it was a rule. If you broke the rule, it was breaking the rules. But all that to say, if that was what a fifth grader thought, I've got to keep the rules whatever the rules are, whether they're dumb or really insignificant on the big scale of things. The truth is, though, somebody thought, you know what, our country will be better if we live right and do right. And here we are. And I'm looking at a lot of people, you say I'm out of school, and I'm not looking at people that I even think is even a threat to really go out and break the law. I get that. But I believe, because there's so many people that don't believe that, sometimes the burden of lifting a nation falls on people that already believe it, but say, you know what, I'm going to do just that much more to try to elevate my country and promote it in the sight of God, so God will bless us and help us and protect us and do all that He wants to do for us. So the truth is, righteousness exalteth a nation. So that means every time you do right, think about your country. Think about when you come to church. I thought about this today. I knew I was going to preach the sermon. You may have had an idea if you saw the bulletin. But the point is, I said, look, when I come to church, I'm coming for God. There's no doubt about it. I could come to church for a lot of reasons. Well, you're the preacher. You probably got to be here. That's one of them. And here I am. I can't just lay at home and go, well, I don't know if I'm going today, like some people. Well, you're the preacher. Yeah, I guess I got to be there. Now, honestly, I don't think that way. But the point is, here's one of the things that I'm going to make sure I think about every time I come to church. I'm going to come to church not just for God and for what's right for me to do and to preach, but I'm going to do it for my nation. I believe every time we come to church, one of the things you can think about in your heart and mind is, you know what? I'm helping my country be what it's supposed to be just by doing the right thing. Definitely coming to church is the right thing. Righteous people do go to church, there's no doubt about it. Now, some people can't be here, I get that. But I believe a nation is better each time a person says, I'm going to go to church because it's right. And by the way, it does exalt our nation. There's no doubt about this nation would not be the nation it is without the God-fearing people that helped put us here back in the day. If you really read the history of this country, and I mean you read it from letters, in other words, people who wrote in the day. One of the things I loved was reading a book. It was a compiled letters that George Washington had written from his youth or young adult all the way up until through some of his presidency. And some of it was quite lengthy. But you see the letters he wrote and the mindset that he had and all of that and this, that, and the other. And one of the things I remember reading about the history of our country from the perspective of people that lived during that time, and by the way, not everybody was on board with independence. I remember taking a trip down to eastern North Carolina, and there was a battle that broke out, one that's not really that you hear in the history books, but I was reading the thing, and it was about people that were loyal to England that lived here that didn't want to break away. And there was a lot of people like that, by the way, all across the colonies. They said, let's just leave things the way they are, and what's the big deal? It's kind of like today, you get up and preach things, people go, is it that urgent? So it was a battle that broke out between those who wanted the independence and those who were kind of the loyalists, loyal to England. And it was quite the interesting story. I guess I thought everybody would have thought, yeah, we want to be free, and everybody's on board. It's just the same day. Not everybody's on board with God. Not everybody's on board with doing the right thing. Not everybody thinks that righteousness exalts a nation. They don't understand that sin is a reproach to any people. I think when people look at our nation from other nations, especially if they have anything about them that's right, that's decent, that's noble, and certainly there's people like that, and they look at some of the things that's going on in this country, I think they shake their head and go, wow, that's almost embarrassing. It is embarrassing. It's reproachful. The word reproach is more than just it's bad. It's like it's embarrassingly bad. It's like someone who does something and they find him and they go, I did that, and it's such a reproach about it. Sin is that way, folks. That's why I'm so glad I was raised in a school system around here and raised at a home and in a church that believed that preaching the Bible, this is pure righteousness. Now, there's a lot of things you can do that's right, but if you get it from the Bible and you get it and say, look, I'm going to do right because right is right, and there's not only a benefit of doing right, but man, I just want us to say to ourselves today with the crowd we have here, because you hear the message others won't. Just say to yourself, you know what? I want to lift up my nation. If my nation needs correction, then I'll help do it through prayer. Then I'll help do it by me living right. You know, there's a tendency today that if someone does something wrong, then another group of people says, well, we're going to do wrong because you've done wrong. Two wrongs do not make a right. You understand that. Retaliation against people who do wrong is not right. God already has a system set up. God says, look, vengeance is mine. I am the just God. I know what's going on. Of course, there's injustices in any country, and there has been injustices in this nation. Anybody that says, no, there's never been that way and paints America as a perfect place, then you're not being honest, because it's made up of people. On the other side, though, for people that want to throw America away and say, well, she's had some flaws. Everybody's got flaws. That's like me saying if you're not perfect, you're not fit for this church. Well, look, I'm not fit to stand behind a pulpit if that's the criteria. But here's the thing. If you've got a system set in place to fix the wrongs and someone don't fix them, the burden is not on the founding of the country and the documents like this book right here and our Constitution. Look, if there's been injustices to groups of people, and there has been, no doubt about it, there's also something within our very documents that fixes that if someone will rise up and say, we're going to do the right thing, and we've already got the answer. One is, let's just preach the Bible, and look, we've got a system already set up that's supposed to fix the wrongs. But if someone goes out here and commits a crime, and the Justice Department of people don't take that and run through the system like they're supposed to, look, that's on them. That's on them, and that's wrong. I think there's something about the Bible. I think like one of the things about our justice system is, look, if you do wrong, there ought to be swift judgment. You don't just imprison people and say, well, one day we'll get to you. I don't believe in that. If you're wrong, be declared wrong if you're wrong. And if you're judged wrong, you've been judged wrong. I'm still glad, look, I live in a country where some people that do wrong, they get off. But I'd still rather live in a system like that than to have a lot of innocent people be taken off and hauled off and things done to them because they're innocent, but there's a little group of people that wants to destroy right. Everybody takes advantage of righteousness, just like all of us, in a way, take advantage of God's mercy. All of us sometimes say, you know what, God's so merciful to me, and sometimes we ride that line a little bit too close because God is merciful. And when God decides to kind of jerk the chain a little bit, well, it gets our attention pretty quick. But it ought to be, God, I'm so grateful that you are merciful and you're kind, but you're also a righteous God. So this is simple. Righteousness exalts, it promotes, it lifts high a nation. Sin is a reproach to any people. So I'm glad that someone said, you know what, I think the age that someone could probably begin to comprehend maybe the doing of right, and it is an interesting age, the age of 12. Someone says in all across America, we're going to give these New Testaments to the children, and they can do with them what they want. No one forced it on us. They said, here you go. Most of us said, wow, thank you. And we were excited. I already had a Bible then. It wasn't like I needed a Bible, but there's something about in school, we're sitting there, and whatever the speech was, I don't know what it was, and they hand you that little New Testament. And everybody had one. We were all excited about it, just kind of like, well, wow, that's nice. And then no doubt somebody said, as they got it, they tried to read a little bit or said, you know what, this is what my preacher preaches from in church, just like mine did. I remember that. But the point is, of all the verses you can put in the front of a Bible, in a public school system, this one being designed literally for the public school children in 5th grade, that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Ms. Vivian, I'm going to have you come. I think I don't need to say anymore. I think we all understand that. I just think we need to commit ourselves to living it. And I do believe this. There's young people that need to see us take our stands. I'm afraid sometimes because things get the way they get, we want to disengage. Like, I said this already, and I'm going to keep saying it. As we get closer to the time we need to vote this November, don't disengage from voting. Don't say, well, I don't think my vote counts. It may not, but you'll never know if you don't vote. If someone does the right thing and says, you know what, at least you cast your vote, you did what you're supposed to do. You ask God, who should I vote for? I believe God will tell you and impress you who you need to vote for. It does matter. I think it matters on these local levels. Look, one of the big problems in America right now is people trying to teach young people in the public school system some of these things we know is just wrong, just vile. Now, who do you think gets to decide if that's going to be taught or not? All these little elections they have around here for school board this and school board that, we go, I don't know who that is. I don't even vote for that. You do need to vote for it. Me and my wife, we try to vote. We try to educate ourselves as best we can. Sometimes it's not easy. I'll tell you what I did like. When we voted this last primary down here in Archdale, Danny, I think you were there. I've never seen this done like this before. And you may not like it. In fact, it was a little bit weird, I guess. But during the primary, as a rule, everybody from the same party, in other words, is usually you vote, I don't get all that. When I walked up there, here's what happened. We parked our car, and all of a sudden we saw all these people, and they turned around and looked at us. And here we are. And I'm not kidding, about 25 to 30 people started handing us stuff. Here, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And one of them was like literally one of the guys that wanted us to vote for him. I can't remember his name. But they're like, they're trying to tell you why we should vote for him. And you're literally you're not even stopping. And you're thinking, well, how in the world could, and I've got all this stuff almost like this in my hand going up to the booth, and I'm thinking, well, I ain't got time to stand here and look at all this stuff. Now, we'd already done a little bit of our homework, but the point is, I'm glad there's people out there, and many of them are like, well, we're God-fearing people. And, we believe this. Sometimes you can kind of tell. There's little markers. But all that to say, here we are. Our country does have some issues. But stay engaged. Do what you can. Pray. Live right. there's things that we do that nobody would ever see us do that wouldn't make the paper, you would not get arrested for, but God sees it. How about what we watch on these smart TVs and our smartphones and what we subscribe to cable-wise? And this is where we really live. And we can get up here and say all we want to about God and go, yeah, and then we leave here and we got to ask ourselves, are you telling me that stuff we watch on a regular basis exalts a nation, or is it reproachful? We watch stuff that on TV is a reproach, even in the fake sense. We look at it, and yet we sit there and eat it up like we're eating T-bone steak. Now, we're all guilty. I'm guilty of it. Because we say, well, I don't watch it to that extent, but I sit there and go to myself, this ain't right. And that's just why it's quiet here. You know why? Because reality is, God says, but I'm looking at my people's heart. Now, we can say there's things wrong in America, and yet we'll sit and watch it on TV as if it's right, because we say, well, that's fake. There's a reason why people after a while get dull to that stuff. We hear stuff and go, well, maybe it's not that bad. Before you know it, we're almost condoning it. I think when it gets down to it, sometimes, sadly, the burden falls on a small group of people, like it's always been that way. Churches are usually run by a very small group of people. It's always going to be that way. It's never going to change. That's the reason why on Wednesday nights you'll have the lowest attendance. And of that group of people, who of those people really are holding up the load? I'm being honest with you. It's the same thing in the country. It's the same thing anywhere. You can go to a job somewhere, and there's usually one or two people, depending on the size of that company, that really is making that place work. You know why? Because there's something, they're invested 100%, and some people just ride the coattails. Now look, we've got a nation here. I tell you what we can do. We can pray like fire. I tell you what, one man, Elijah, prayed, and the Bible says the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. You know what? The burden of Israel was on that man's shoulders. And God told one man, I want you to go pray, and I'm going to turn the water off after you pray, the rain. Now, we talk about this drought going on here. How about 3.5 years worth? We've been about 3.5 months. Now, you know what? That could happen to this country, and I think God sometimes shows us a little bit what God could do. Now, I'm here to tell you, I know the Lord could come back at any time, but what if God says, I'm going to put America through what I put my own people through? Imagine how this nation would be brought to its knees, and almost the world, if God says, I'm not going to let it rain for 3.5 years. The corn, all the things, it just was gone. Now, you know what would happen, because there's already enough people that's so freaked out about stuff, they just couldn't handle it. And you know what? God told one man, pray that it won't rain, and God honored that prayer. You say, why didn't God just do it? Because something about God says, I'm going to look and see if I can at least count on one person to grab my heart. And then he said to Elijah, Elijah, now it's time for it to rain. Why didn't God just let it rain? You know what God said to Elijah? Go pray. And there he went. And if you look at the story, he prayed and prayed. He had a little servant. He says, go by the sea and see if there's any clouds coming. And the guy says, there's nothing. It's like it's been for 3.5 years. He says, well, okay, I'm going to pray some more, and I'm going to pray some more, and I'm going to pray some more. Why in the world do you have to pray that much? Because God says, I'm going to see who's serious about this. And all of a sudden he went, and the guy says, hey, I see a cloud out there about the size of a man's hand. And Elijah says, oh boy, it's getting ready to do it now. And he told Ahab, you better get in your house because the rains are coming. And you know what? Everybody took off flying. Imagine for 3.5 years not seeing it rain. Now, it's supposed to rain today. To be honest with you, if it rains now, I think I might just get out and play in it. Unless it's right before church, I can't come in soaking. But I sat in my little white rocking chair out beside the garden, and I watched the lightning. I thought, is it coming? Is it coming? In fact, I thought I felt a drop or two. I mean, it's probably even a bug just bumped me. I said, well, Lord, if you don't, you don't. Maybe tomorrow. I mean, they're calling for it, but that's up to you. But all I can say is this. Now, there's a God, and just as much as what a blessing it'll be to let the literal showers fall, God says, you know what, I've been looking at a nation. I've been looking at America for 246 years. And before you really were even free, you called yourself free, but you had to fight. You had to give up things. Some of you died. And then here we are as a nation. And man, what a country we have. Even like Mike said, even with the negatives, put all that aside and forget that, and then look and see what we have. Good night in the morning. We're doing pretty awesome, even as bad as it is, to be quite honest with you. But man, we want God to put his hand upon us. So let's exalt our nation.